Hello YouTube, Infinite Magicraid community, Gandalf here. As promised, this month I'll be rolling out the compendium of PvP composition tier lists. It's going to be a little bit different, than the tier list you're used to seeing, where, you have the heroes ranked by individuals. Infinite Magic Raid is a team-based game. It's not about the strength of one individual hero, it's about the synergy that you can create between heroes. So it's much easier for me to talk about team composition templates. And here I'm going to quickly walk through how to interpret this infographic. And then, for those who don't have a lot of time to stick around, I'll quickly scroll up so you can, take a screenshot of it, and then refer back to it later. Or if you're an end game player, you can just look at the end game composition, what you need, and go for those teams. But if you do have time to stick around, I'll talk about what are some of the watch items about specific heroes in these comp, maybe what kind of speed tuning you're aiming for, if you're early game, what to potentially invest in. So depending on what how much time you have for this video, hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of intro and a guide to how to use this information effectively. So first, start off the bat. Hopefully it's easy to read. I've tried to write the minimum exclusive you need to be at for these teams to be effective. So you can see it's exclusive 0, 3, 1, 0. When you see something like a +1 with a line, that means all of these hero here are kind of like a tech option in your team composition, in some way help round out some aspect of your team. For example, if you want a little bit more control, you can throw in Quinlan, Nizil. If you want a little bit more ability to go first, you can try to put in a Lydia. Or if you want more damage, you can put in Popper or put in Whistler. So these are some options you have there. Um, then over here, I talk about, if you were to, use stamp with some of your key DPS heroes, if you don't have a Margarita and be something else, these are substitute. When you see these arrows, it means substitute for these hero in that particular slot. And then these are perhaps some of the stamps you could be running. And again, I try to do it from the top of the list. You have, your early game teams, and I rank them offensive tier versus defensive tier. So, you know, because it's in most of your content, you do have the option of choosing which target you attack. So it's attacker's advantage. So this team is really strong in offense, but if you put it on defense, there's many weaknesses to exploit. So, the defense rating is really weak, but the offense rating is relatively strong. In general, Cleave teams are pretty strong offensively. Okay, so having said that, let's quickly scroll through the content here. So at the top, early game, this is what you're kind of aiming for, the classic Margarita, Bisset, and Cleave. Once you get a little bit more resource, what you can aim for is the strip into the Nita Cleave. Nita is the highest AoE damage dealing, so if you can manage to get a focus or some way to get Nita to take a second turn, that is a very good option, where you kind of use 2 turn meters, allowing the rest of your team doesn't have to have too much speed, so you strip into a nuke combo. Once you get to mid game, you really want to start looking for that high speed option of getting your space at exclusive 3. You're aiming for like the 3K speed space with like a 2800 plus Whistler to follow up. Whistler is going to boost that Nita. Now you're going for more damage on the Nita. Um, Nita could potentially be replaced with, Barry or Anna, assuming they have the corresponding stamps. Very high comparable gear to reach anywhere near Nita's level of damage, but Nita is the top pick. You have some tech options we can talk about later if you decide to stick around. Then you start to introduce Popper. So Popper, the likes of Popper, Bunny, Whistler will start boosting your direct damage dealer quite a bit. So if you have Bunny do need exclusive 3 to make your direct damage dealer super effective. So now you can bring in the likes of Mekio, you have Belton, and you have Bull, which are highly effective direct damage dealers. Then finally, if you're at end game where you have, really strong heroes and limited heroes, pushing Agatha even to E3, you got multiple mythics here, this is kind of the end game hybrid speed cleaves where they can take out a wide range of team, and even defensively, they're quite difficult to take down. So hopefully, for those who didn't have a lot of time to stick around, you can take a screenshot of this, especially if you're, an end game player. This is kind of what you want. Obviously, you need exclusive 3 for all of them. Focus will benefit from, 50% chance of giving your target another turn. Lydia is super helpful for, securing first turn or making your team a little bit more tanky if required, or just giving your team more damage output. So and we can, if you stick around, you can listen to, the recommendation on auras and stamps for these heroes when we get down to there. But you kind of see, what is the common trend here for very strong cleave teams. Okay, with that kind of out of the way, let's go to the beginning. And talk about, your early game player. So as an early game player, you're probably going to be not, you're not going to have a lot of exclusives. You are really going to, probably use your eyes on things like Hazanja and heroes that can really help you push PvE content. PvP, you know, comes after you're able to farm high level gear to get you the speed, to get you the stats you need, right? So everybody's going to get a Margarita. So Margarita E1 is pretty easily obtainable. In fact, some of you will even be using Margarita in your PvE content early on. So, leaving her at E1 is a very good option. Even if you don't have focus, everybody can get a Bisiden. Space, Bisiden, Margarita is sufficient to cleave out most of your enemy at early game. You want to be using the crit damage. One with Margarita, you only need 50% crit rate. You want to you don't need speed, you just need a lot of attack and crit damage, so this is a great option. Now, if you can get over 300 plus crit damage early game, which is very, very impressive, you probably then wouldn't want to use this one. That's when the diminishing return on crit damage means it's better to actually use the skill damage increase for the nuke. So that's the other option for you. Now, for whatever reason, early game, you manage to get your hands on a lot of Slacto or, Belton, you want to invest in your Belton, or, you decide to pick Melchio because he's really cool as a first mythic. Don't do that, by the way. But, you can play the game whatever way you want, as early game. But I'm just saying, for some whatever reason, you have these heroes. These are the other options, but really early game, this is what you're looking at, using the least amount of investment, keeping them at E0. If you happen to be lucky enough to pull a focus, definitely focus will double the damage output, allowing you to AoE a second time. But other than if you don't have a focus, you can pick any of the 2 tech options here. If you happen to get a Nazil, Nazil E1 is great to freeze the enemy. If you happen to have even, a E0 Panda is going to boost your attack damage dealer. Whistler is going to boost your attack damage dealer. If you have a Popper, Popper is going to be able to go before your Bista most likely, so you can do defense down, tenacity down, allowing you to do more damage with your Margarita. If you saw some of my videos on Gandalf the Grey earlier on, you probably would have seen, the Ascendo or space into the Popper, into the Bista, into Margarita, and I have a really slow Whistler with as much attack as possible. So these are basically stat sticks, debuff, and this is a very strong early game cleave that will, as long as you can outspeed your opponent, you're going to be cleaving them and sending them home and pushing yourself to the top of the arena in those early server. Because in the first few weeks, you know, everybody's going to be, on budget gear, budget heroes, low exclusive, unless you decide to, dump thousands into the game day one. Um, this is where you're going to be running. And, this is going to help you push yourself to the top of the arena list early on and get more mythic shards than others. Now, if you're somewhat of an early to mid game player and you start to, get your first mythic, and a lot of people do pick Nita as your first mythic, you now have a better cleaving option. And hopefully, by this point in the game, you have now gotten a stripper, and that by that I mean I don't mean the ones that are are dancing around a pole. I mean something that can remove all the buffs off the enemy. And this is useful against teams that have a panda that has the effect of res up everybody. It will reduce the pressure you have to deal with on trying to get Nita very high effect hit. Using Guhana, combination with space, allows you to have less speed required on the rest of your team to be properly space tuned, speed tuned. So then, you can have lower speed and still be able to have your entire team finish the combo before your opponent. Don't build your speed, sorry, don't build your space with all the speed gear you possibly have. Rest of your team is not going to keep up. You'll end up getting cut. So, take a look at my speed tuning video, and that will explain it very much. At the bottom of the link, um, I have linked the fundamentals of PvP and the speed tuning video, so check those out. I'll be using some language and lingo, and I think by going through the fundamentals video, it will really help you understand the thought process behind building these teams or using these as team templates. So really, what you got here is strip. Now, recently we got, that's also another one that can remove buffs, so I'm just putting it in here. But normally, you wouldn't want to be using her. She's much better off in a tanky second turn team. You want to pick options that have, that are supporters, so that from a speed perspective, it's less likely, less challenge to hit those speed stats. I will go with Neskarma. If you have E1 Slackdo laying around, that might work. So again, I'm trying to hold on, trying to go with low exclusive team setups. And then what you want to do is put one of these supporting heroes that are after Nita with just say one speed slower, so that then they can give your Nita another turn. Now, if you don't have a focus, you have the Biston option, so you can start with Nita skill 2, then into Nita ultimate, or you can use a Ross, you can even use Cthulhu. Like any of these heroes will immediately can give your Nita a second turn. So these teams are very strong offensively because starting at exclusive 1 Nita, she can trigger her own dots. Ideally, you go for exclusive 3, but we're still talking about that early to mid game, um, where you're at. Here again, if you happen to have a Barry or Anna E3 at either of them for whatever reason, you got really lucky and pulled multiple copy of them, or you invested in it early and you decide not to get Anita, these two heroes would at E3 will perform equal or maybe even slightly better than Anita E1. So you can put them in there and you can give them a double turn. Focus, ideally you do ultimate with both. If not, use your skill 2 first, then into the ultimate for the double detonation damage. They will both benefit a lot from the skill setup, skill boost 1 um, for the setup. So now we are on to the next section. So now you're kind of looking at your mid-game setup where you kind of are starting to go for that space E3. Your teams are now properly speed tuned. You're able to get your wrestler to keep up to your space. This is where we start to, look. It's pretty much the same composition, but you should be now running a E3 Nita. Ideally, you can afford to put this poison, you put a poison stamp, you can put that on any of your tech options, ideally Popper, or even on one of the heroes here space to give that Nita extra poison damage. You have the option of swapping it out for Barry and Anna, but for Barry and Anna to keep up with Nita type of damage, you really need to have high level and high stars on some of these hero specific stamps that will really boost their damage. So this is what you're looking at for Barry. So I don't have this one yet. I don't have, my Barry doesn't have that great gear, but in general, I mean, I have a very strong Nita, so you will see at end game players, everyone's using a Nita. Nita doesn't take any damage from other Nitas or DAW-based damage, which actually makes her more effective than any of these other heroes on defense. So, this is your defensive option immediately becomes stronger the moment you start putting Nita on defense as well. Um, you have the option of running Panda, which is a great tech option if you have him at E3 at this point, allowing you to, you want to run a super slow Panda so that if you do get hit by a freeze, it protects the weakness against this team. So in fact, endgame players, if you're running like a 3K, 3.2K speed space with a very fast, Whistler around 3K, and maybe like a 1500 Panda, you should be able to make your Panda go before your space and protect everybody, and then, your combo still goes off. Um, Lydia and Nazil are also good options offensively because if you happen to be slower than your opponent, you can auto attack with your Nazil, assuming it has very high effective hit or something more reliable. like using Lydia to reduce the turn meter because they go first automatically. Your space then will definitely be able to go first, and then you get to cleave them before they hit you. Um, Finally, Popper is another tech option. So Popper at exclusive 2 allows you to strip off a layer of buff and be able to take a second turn when 2 of your heroes move. So it's really great having space follow up into Popper so you can apply the defense down, the resist down, and strip the effective res buff, for example, off the Panda. So exclusive 3 is not required to push the turn meter back, assuming you're properly space tuned. But if you don't have it, if having exclusive 3 was great. So this is the composition I was showing this morning in my video. If you haven't got a chance to watch, it's a very long video, unfortunately, but the first 20 minutes has a lot of highlights of this particular team running with Popper in it. Moving on to near end game cleavers. So this is where now another limited hero comes into play, and we do need the bunny Esther at exclusive 3. Um, at exclusive 3, your Esther is going to be able to not only give you the 25% turn meter, it's going to give you a whole bunch of piercing and up to 80% direct damage boost, assuming your Esther is at 100% or more healing percentage. So this drastically increased the output of your direct damage dealers. So if you were looking at the second half of this morning's video, you get to see my Machio literally wipe out any sort of defense. Like doesn't matter how tanky they are, like even with Lydia E3s in there, I was just, completely wiping them out. But you do need a combination of Whistler and you need Esther to go with it to really boost it up. Um, you want to be able to follow up your nuker with Abyssidon to allow them to use the second part of their skill. Belton has a double ult. His ult actually has 2 charges at exclusive 2. Exclusive 3 allows that piercing to be on all of the third skill, allowing you to hit a huge amount. Belton's damage come very close to Malkio, in fact, possibly even higher. However, Malkio does have more utility like strip, turn meter reduction, stuns. So my preference is Melkio, and he can hit through shields and damage immunity. So that's why I like to pair this with him. You can start with skill 1, then trigger the bunny red buff, allowing him to give a second turn, then he will strip, and then Bisting and follow up with a big nuke. So this is one way of doing it. The other way of, your Whistler can just auto attack one target, and Melkio will follow up and, auto attack as well. Um, if you're using that setup, you can also use this particular um, stamp because Whistler at skill 2, exclusive 1 or 2 is, I think 2, is going to stealth Malkio being paired up with it as well. So, you will benefit from this particular stamp. Now, if you don't have any of these, for any of these damage dealers, um, you know, boosting it with this crit damage and crit stamp is a great way of adding additional stats. Moreover, for Bull, you also have the option of using the blue stamp if you don't have any of these purple ones as an option. Again, great setup. Now, if you're my preference at this level of the game, because how much Lydia are around, I would recommend using a popper instead of space because you turn meter push back, then you use Esther potentially into the blue egg first, allowing you to break out of imprison. Then you can get turn meter gain from Ristler afterwards. So stronger on the defense side when you start using Ristler. Now, with combination of Bunny and Ristler, you're more than enough to be able to kill a target and go a second turn. So by taking out the Bissidin and putting in Nizil for a freeze to force the enemy to bring a panda or scare them into bringing a panda, bringing something like a Lydia. Sorry, I don't have the icon of Lydia here. It could potentially work for additional damage boosting. So you just clean one shot them, or to imprison them, or just bring a panda. All of these will increase the defensive option, and your offensive option don't really drop that much without Bissidin, because normally you can kill them without the Bissidin already. But if you're just purely using it on classic arena attack, your preset with the Bissidin setup is still the strongest setup out of all the options here because you can choose who you attack into. Finally, let's talk about some of the hybrid teams. This is where you start to see the end game content where you got, exclusive 3 or even exclusive 5 on all of these heroes. You're looking at, Megalodons and Krakens with their stats, and they're incredibly strong. And what we see a common theme is you see the Esther and Popper combo. And the reason why this is super effective is Popper, as soon as 2 of your heroes take turn, Popper automatically removes all his debuffs and being able to go. So both of them, Popper being the fastest in your team, and then Esther also getting a 30% turn meter at the beginning, is very easy. Even if you get CC, the 2 of them are going to be able to take 2 turns before the enemy, allowing Popper to go, reduce the enemy turn meter. Then you should be able to go into your wombo combo. The panda there will help, prevent any CC type teams that's trying to go after you from a cleave from a trying to stop you from going first with control teams or other and then you also got any sort of defense. Just today we still don't think it really comes down to stats now. Even against the tankiest team right now out in the meta, like the Nordak, Panda, Santa, Hen with Lydia, you still can cleave through that with most of these teams. Your imprison's not gonna stop you from blue egging your Nita, making Nita be able to go, your Popper, assuming it has very high effective hit, you're going to be able to remove the layer of effective res. You're going to be able to put an effect res down on the enemy, allowing your Nita to cleave through. So again, this is very much stat based, right? So for example, this morning you saw me trying to, if again referring to this morning's video in the masterclass, I'll put a link to the description below so you can see some example of these teams. Now, going against people lower the level than me, it was just like, cutting them through like butter, hot knife through butter. But people on the same level, we kind of struggle a little bit. Then against the megalodons, the stats that I have isn't there to cleave through them. So really, you could have the best composition in the at very end game. It becomes a battle of who has the higher stats, so who has the bigger sanctuary, who has the bigger incarnated sanctuary for the most part. The second team, we're featuring Agatha E3, and this is where I think, Agatha E2 at this point, yeah, you can do the damage from the Popper defense down, but I would prefer, the likes of, Belton or Macchio in the earlier setup there for it. But Agatha E3, I think, is worth mentioning to be the end game or final high-end hybrid team because of the additional revive on her, making this team much stronger defensively. Then we also move on to the offensive option here where you bring a Lydia E3, which is great for manually targeting and making sure you're able to go first, or to on the defense you adding additional um, tankiness to your team or boost your team's damage or just imprison so they can't use a standard cleave team against you. Lydia is a great option. And then finally, here's the one many of you see in my videos is my go-to counter for Lydia based team. It works against Lydia plus Henna, but it's starting to fall behind a little bit because again my stats are a little bit lacking. I need to find a way to put more effective hit on my Nita, since now everyone's Panda has the new stamp, probably getting another 10 additional effective hits. So right now I'm running around 150-ish. I'm probably going to try to push to 165 or higher on my Nita to be able to, go through some of these new super high effector res pandas. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. It gives you a lot of food for thought for how to build effective teams. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. There was a lot of content to cover. Hopefully you guys like the format. I appreciate any feedback or questions in the comments below. And I'll catch you guys next time. And what we'll try to cover next time is maybe we'll cover all of the control type um, teams in a similar format. And then finally, we'll go through all of the tanky teams. All right, wherever you are, have a great rest of your day. Take care.